Whoa, this video is totally not good for photosensitive types. This episode of Bullet Heaven was made possible with a copy of the game provided by PlayAsia. With so many shooting games seeing release over, the last 40 years or so, how does a developer freshen things up in a genre so old, storied, and varied as shmups? There has to be a way, and developer Sonoshi took the sensory overload route. RIM 9000 is a vertical shooting game developed by Sonoshi, and it saw release to Steam on January 15th, 2018. It would later be released to the PlayStation 4 on January 31st, 2019, published by East Asia Soft, complete with a boxed limited edition release, which is where we're picking up. Beyond that, the North American PSN version would later be released by Rainbite on February 19th, 2019. We've already warned all of you out there who might be photosensitive about this one, and if you're still watching this, come on, you really shouldn't be. But before we get started, we just kinda have to point this out. Making an epilepsy warning flash like this is a pretty big dick move, don't you think? For its ridiculous lack of subtlety in all of its obvious areas, RIM 9000 is a game that has a very simple structure to its gameplay. It was actually so simple that it got to the point that we had to reference the manual to make sure we weren't missing something. Basically, outside of movement, which is handled by the PS4's D-pad or left analog stick, all of the buttons on the controller shoot the player's main weapons. There is no secondary fire, but the player's ship will slow down anytime its guns are engaged. One neat aspect to RIM 9000 is the indicators around the player's ship. Flashing indicators will appear around the player's ship which point in the direction of incoming enemies. This will give the player a good idea of where stuff will appear on the screen, even if they come from behind. The player will eventually have the option of switching to another fire pattern by way of weapon pickups dropped by destroyed carriers in the middle of any given stage. A lot of these weapons will allow the player to efficiently take out enemies at different angles, but can also be pretty tricky to use for other enemies or bosses. Once the weapon pattern changes, it will not change again until another weapon is picked up in the next stage, or if the player dies and restarts the stage they're in. Furthermore, these weapons will appear in pairs, and each stage has a unique set of weapons to collect. With this in mind, if the player is hit, they won't die right away, but this is where the already loud visual style takes a turn for the retina blasting. The playfield will end up going haywire with flashing, strobing, tearing, and almost corrupted graphics which can seriously disorient and jam a player's vision. A pair of lines that intersect the ship at 90 degrees helps in letting players see where the heck they are, but it's not a ton of help, all told. While all of this is happening though, the player will also gain enormous power to their shots. At the very least, given the visual onslaught, these boosted shots will chew through enemies with super efficiency. However, no matter the weapon pattern that might have been picked up by the player, this supercharged weapon boost will only ever fire forward. A player in this vulnerable state will die if they get hit again, only to be thrown to the beginning of the stage that they're in. However, players can also revert back to normal status, visuals included, by collecting a flashing life recovery pickup which will spawn after a certain amount of time. Players are always able to recover from vulnerable status so long as a life recovery item can be scooped up. From there, it's up to the player to navigate each stage in as efficient a manner as possible to take on the area's boss and progress to the next of 5 stages. Players can also trigger unlockable RIM 9000 lore by satisfying various conditions in the game. These unlocks are also linked to RIM 9000's trophy set, which can add replay to the game for those looking to uncover all of the mysteries to RIM 9000's world. And it would all be pretty alright if it weren't for a number of factors, not the least of which are the technical issues that rose their filthy heads as we played. More than once, RIM 9000 crashed in various ways, including a locked up screen mid-stage, which I missed the recording of, and a full get the f*** back to the PlayStation 4 home screen error, which I did capture. You know, just as I finished the goddamn game. This is exactly the kind of thing that pushes us away from coming back to a title, especially since it appears that the fix to this issue is to update the game. You know, with an update that doesn't exist. You know what, as an aside, we hear the argument all the time that physical media such as the disc we played RIM 9000 off of are complete, fully patched versions that can be preserved and owned, with no worries that they will need updates or patches to function if they are delisted or unsupported. This kind of proves otherwise though. There are obviously huge technical issues under the hood here, and for the kinds of fixes that seem to need to be done, this might have well have been a download-only game. Alright, enough of that. In short, RIM 9000 is mostly playable if basic, and not terribly long, but features a bunch of challenges to encourage repeat plays. That said, let's go on to scoring. The scoring in RIM 9000 takes cues from Raiden, in that the faster an enemy is taken out, the higher its score will be worth. Any enemy on the screen will be one of 3 colors. White will award 3 times the points, yellow will give the player twice the score, and red will yield the base, regular, run-of-the-mill, normal, single-serve, non-multiplied boring point value. This also applies to bosses, so the faster a player can take out as many enemies as they can, the higher the score will be. The player's score will also be maintained if the player dies and gets kicked back to the beginning of the stage. Whatever score the player had at stage start will be where it is if players bite it. At game end, if the player does well enough, they can rank into an online leaderboard that displays the world's top 10 players, which we didn't get to see because... what the f***? So, in short, the scoring is simple and easy to grasp. The scores aren't huge like a game such as Mushihime-sama, and game crashes can completely f***ing mess with your run. You ever play a game that looks pissed off at you? The kind that screams at you like f***ing constantly? The kind of vicious sensory abuse that makes everything kind of shudder and vibrate, even after you've looked away for a bit? Well, that's more or less what the visuals in this game are like. RIM 9000's pixel art style is, well, it's a little off. It looks like the whole game was just put through a general light mosaic pixelation filter rather than using traditional pixel-style graphics. It's almost like watching a YouTube video in 2006, but after 17 energy drinks and some serious substance abuse. It's definitely not very pleasant at the very least, and when things get really f***ed up, a migraine is more or less guaranteed. The music, composed by Roex, is definitely a redeeming factor. It has that cool down-sampled, trancey, flanged mix of synthwave wrapped up in a vaporwave edge. Kinda. The sound effects are totally blown out and loud as hell though, so there's some bad with the good. All in all, the music is the strongest part of RIM 9000, which might make it worth getting the limited edition if only to get the soundtrack, probably. Thankfully, for those that can't handle RIM 9000's special brand of ocular hate-fueled intensity, a new mode for PlayStation 4 allows players to turn the eyeball melting effects off. But it's still not enough for photosensitive folks, and if you're still here, you'd better only be listening instead of actually watching this, or so help me. But it'll reduce the likelihood of a serious cranium-smashing headache by a fair margin. There's even a Tate mode for players that have vertical monitors, and a cool animated wallpaper for those getting their Yoko on. The lore that opens up as players tackle more challenges also offers a glimpse into a crazy world with some truly imaginative phenomena and plot points, which also makes this all worthwhile. Mostly. Just look at this SR-71. What? So, how does RIM 9000 stack up? Let's take a look. RIM 9000 controls alright, but the player ship is often too slow and mostly underpowered. RIM 9000 seems hard at first, but memorization is all players really need to get through in the end. RIM 9000 has a bit of staying power with its challenges and leaderboards, but a variety of game crashes can make any given run a total uncertainty. The visuals in RIM 9000 are definitely, unique, and there's some cool design here, but the insane quote-unquote effects used here. If you're gonna play this game, save yourself the headache. Turn the effects off. RIM 9000's music is fantastic, but the sound effects, while mostly okay, are too blown out. They also hurt. There's not much to RIM 9000 that isn't done better in any number of other shooting games. Stay for the music and lore, ditch it for everything else. RIM 9000 is only like $7 on Steam, and the PlayStation 4 version with its additional features and, okay, its quote-unquote fixes, can be downloaded for $8 US. The limited edition from East Asia Soft is still available for about $35 US and includes the great OST and a manual featuring the lore of the game, which kinda defeats the purpose of unlocking it to begin with. Look for our unboxing coming soon. It was intriguing, it looked interesting, it promised to be unique, and on all fronts it was. But not in the ways we had hoped. RIM 9000 is a painful game to play, and it's marred by critical bugs that gives any score run the potential to be a complete waste of time. Neat concept, great music, dreadful execution. RIM 9000 gets a 2.75 out of 5. If the shortcomings we found don't bother you, or if audiovisual abuse is something you dig, you can get a copy of RIM 9000 on Steam or PSN on the cheap, or at playasia.com with all the fixins using the affiliate link below. Ugh, that was harsh. On me, not the game, holy cow. Well, Daerun is on a business trip, so Assault Android Cactus needed to be postponed to episode 237. We also have some neat Dojin PC games and PlayStation shooters that we want to take a look at soon, so look forward to them all on future episodes of Bullet Heaven. Also, consider becoming a patron on Patreon. If we can get 6% of our viewers on board for just $1 an episode, we can work on Bullet Heaven full time. Links below.